Hey, good morning, friends. Today, my friends, is Tuesday, October the 7th, 2025, and the time now is 7:29 a.m. So, friends, I want to talk about the Secretary of Defense slash Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And I want to talk specifically about the recent meeting that they had in Virginia with members of the Joint Chief of Staff and the various generals of the various departments of defense or Department of War. Now, friends, I'm going to talk about specific things that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth said at the meeting in terms of their speeches, and I'm going to basically issue my perspective and also the possible outcome that I think, or outcomes that I think what they said, their speeches, and their intention could basically result to. Now, friends, I want to start immediately and let it be known. In terms of what both Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump said at the meeting with the generals, or what they said to the generals of the various departments of the Department of Defense slash Department of War. One being that what Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump did was nothing but just rumbling. They rumbled and they beat their chest. Basically, what I got from what they said was the United States is the number one country in the world. The United States military is the number one on the face of the earth. The United States military has the most effective firepower in the world. This is something that we've heard throughout America's recent existence by American leaders, especially in recent times. So it is not new. Now, friends, in terms of what Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense slash Secretary of War, did, summoning the generals of the various branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, in terms of what he did, basically summoning these generals from various parts of the country, the United States, and various parts of the world, and basically gathering them in one location in the United States. Of course, it is safe. But according to military protocol, as many have said, that it is illegal or that it is something that is very stupid, that no one should have done that. Gathering all of America's top military officials in one location, in one room, for whatever meeting it is. And not only doing that, but also publishing where the meeting was going to take place, publishing the meeting, and it ends up not being that Pete Hegseth was even trying to trick America's enemies out there, basically saying, all you generals, come here, we are going to have this meeting, and we are going to be at this location. Let's assume that some kind of radical rogue American enemies out there that do not have no care, do not give a damn about anything, decided to throw bombs. Basically, one ballistic missiles could have annihilated every general or every top military officials in that building. So this was very stupid. Another thing that Pete Hegseth did is basically, as he spoke at one point in his speech, he motioned or mentioned to the generals, to the officials, that if you don't like what I am saying, basically eat shit. If you don't like what I'm saying, you can do us the honor of resigning.
But if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you should do the honorable thing and resign. We would thank you for your service. And if that makes me toxic, then so be it.
And Donald Trump, to an extent, also did that when he spoke. He stated that you are free to walk out if you don't like what I'm saying. Of course, if you walk out, there goes your title, there goes your rank, there goes your position, your job. What this was an intimidation technique.
And if you want to applaud, you applaud. And if you want to do anything you want, you can do anything you want. And if you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank, there goes your future.
What Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth were doing was to intimidate the generals, to intimidate the top officials of the U.S. Armed Forces or U.S. military. Also hoping that some of them resign, or it is also a technique to try to weed out those who will protest. Basically identify those who will protest. Once they protest, or once they can identify them, then they can begin to basically fire them, get rid of them. However, what I think this is doing, actually, it is basically dividing the United States top military into two camps. The camp that is for Donald Trump and the camp that is opposing to Donald Trump. Basically, as I've said before, the United States is going through a civil war. However, the civil war in the United States, as I think it is nothing but a cold civil war. Yes, of course, people in the United States every now and then will assassinate or execute, murder one another. As we saw recently with their execution, as I would say as of now, the execution of Charlie Kirk, which happened at a school, a university or college in broad daylight in real time. Of course, it is not new. We've seen execution or murder going on in America, in schools, in public buildings or facilities throughout the country. So the execution of Charlie Kirk is not new. However, yes, we can see all these murder going on, all these gang violence or individual violence going on, or mass shooting throughout the United States. This is just nothing. It is just peanut. The United States is experiencing a cold civil war. Of course, that cold civil war can basically ignite into a hot civil war. Now, friends, perhaps you will tell me what you think. In terms of Pete Hegseth, in his speech, as much as he talked about various things, he focused, as he said, on the culture, military culture.
This speech today is about people, and it's about culture.
At one point, he stated that no longer the Department of War will tolerate men, soldiers dressing like women, gay stuff or whatsoever.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that shit. I've made it my mission to uproot the obvious distractions that made us less capable and less lethal.
Now, I have never heard or seen any evidence at any time of U.S. military officials or U.S. soldiers, armed officials, dressing like women. Of course, friends, there is a don't ask, don't tell policy in the U.S. military, which is a person can be gay or whatsoever. It is their rights. They do not have to disclose it, and no one has to ask them to disclose their sexuality. Now, friends, Pete Hegseth, during his speech, or at many points during his speech, attacked the U.S. Department of Defense, or now the U.S. Department of War, the various branches of the U.S. Armed Forces or U.S. military, basically terming them woke Department of Defense or Department of War, woke military or woke armed forces, and stated, as I've said, that no longer the United States, the Department of War as of now, will tolerate gay stuff, will tolerate wokeness.
In many ways, this speech is about fixing decades of decay, some of it obvious, some of it hidden. For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas. We became the woke department.
He also attacked the fact that some military groups, some groups in the military, such as African Americans, blacks, who are said to have some issue with shaving, it creates some kind of reaction when they shave. As a result, they are given some kind of exception. Hegseth is saying that no longer will the military tolerate that. He stated also that the military is not going to tolerate wokeness, it's not going to tolerate the quota system, it's not going to tolerate DEI. Even though I do not remember hearing him mention DEI explicitly. But when you listen to his speech, when you translate what he is saying, he is attacking DEI. Hegseth basically stated that the military will basically get rid of, or the armed forces, the Department of Defense, will get rid of unnecessary training, okay? Computerized training, basically spend money on the military and require military personnel, soldiers, to spend much of their time practicing preparing for war. He stated that the United States doesn't want war, which is very interesting. The United States is always at war. The United States is number one when it comes to waging unnecessary war or wars and justifying unnecessary wars.
You see, the motto of my first platoon was those who long for peace must prepare for war. This is, of course, not a new idea. This crowd knows that. The origin dates to the 4th century Rome and has been repeated ever since, including by our first commander-in-chief, George Washington, the first leader of the War Department. It captures a simple yet profound truth. To ensure peace, we must prepare for war. From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: warfighting, preparing for war and preparing to win, unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit. Not because we want war, no one here wants war, but it's because we love peace. We love peace for our fellow citizens. They deserve peace, and they rightfully expect us to deliver it. Our number one job, of course, is to be strong so that we can prevent war in the first place. The president talks about it all the time. It's called peace through strength. And as history teaches us, the only people who actually deserve peace are those who are willing to wage war to defend it. That's why pacifism is so naive and dangerous. It ignores human nature and it ignores human history. Either you protect your people and your sovereignty, or you will be subservient to something or someone. It's a truth as old as time.
He stated something that I've heard many American leaders have said, that in order for the United States to promote peace, the United States has to prepare for war, which is it's stupid, it's foolish.
Another way to put it is peace through strength. We must be prepared. If we're going to prevent and avoid war, we must prepare now. We are the strength part of peace through strength. And either we're ready to win or we are not.
Now, one thing I would say is that was unnecessary. And when you heard Pete Hegseth and then Donald Trump speak, I believe what the generals and other military personnel or armed forces personnel, Department of Defense or now Department of War personnel were saying, I believe, was, how the fuck did these guys get into office? How the fuck did we allow Donald Trump to become the president of the United States? Donald Trump is sick, there is no doubt. Hearing Donald Trump speaking, there was no fire in his voice, in his appearance, in his speech. And for Hegseth, he sounds very much mediocre. He sounds mediocre.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff and so many others in this room who together represent the greatest and most elite fighting force in the history of the world, the United States military. We're very proud of our military. I rebuilt the military during my first term. It's one of the greatest achievements. We had the greatest economy in history, and I built the military. Those are the two things I say more than anything else. And I also kept us safe at the borders. We had very good borders. We didn't have people coming in from jails and prisons and everything like took place over the last 4 years. I'll never forget what happened to this country over the last 4 years with the incompetence. There could be no higher honor than to serve as your commander-in-chief. It is a great honor. I look at you, you're just incredible people. central casting, I might add. I'm thrilled to be here this morning to address the senior leadership of what is once again known around the world as the Department of War. I know Pete spoke about it. He gave a great speech, I thought. Great speech. I don't want him to get so good. I hate that. You know? No, I hate it. I almost fired him. I said, you can't, I don't want to go on after that. No, he gave a great speech, but he talked about Department of War. We were sitting there. I said, didn't it used to be called the Department of War? And he goes, yes, sir. They changed it like in the early 50s. So we won the First World War. We won the Second World War. We won everything in between and everything before that. We only won. And then we went, in a way, woke. That was probably the first sign of wokeness. And we changed it to defense instead of war. And I said, what do you think? How do you think if we changed it back? Would that be a nice idea? And Pete loved it immediately. Some people thought about it. You know, they gave it a little thought. But in the end, we did it. And I have to be honest, it's so popular. I thought it would be met with fury on the left. But they're sort of giving up, I must be honest with you. They've had it. They've had it with Trump. They've been after me for so many years now. Here we are. Here we are. Come to the White House anytime you'd like.
For Pete Hegseth, he was mediocre. Friends, I'm a teacher. Now let's assume I went to college and I finally get a job. That's my first job. Teach for 1 year, and I decided, or whatever happened, I decided to go into the office. And I'm talking in this case, in the office of my department, my education department, or my education district. In terms of the job that I get, my new job, which is no longer in the classroom, is to evaluate teachers. Now, friends, let's assume that I'm now in the building, in the school building. I am evaluating some teachers. And once again, the teachers who I am evaluating are seasoned veterans. They've taught for years, for decades, and we can find such people in education throughout the world and in the United States who basically love the profession and who have been in the classroom teaching for decades, for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And some of them actually do not want to retire. And me, a 1-year teacher who taught for only 1 year and then decided to go into the office. Now I'm in the school building evaluating teachers. I will say that even though many of those teachers, or all of them, will not want to say, dude, shut the fuck up. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Even though they are not going to say that explicitly, I believe this is what they are going to be thinking. And for me, as the now evaluator, it is going to be awkward coming into a building, into a school building, trying to basically penalize teachers for what I perceive to be wrong in their classroom. And I'm talking about teachers who've had decades of experience. That's what it felt to me as Pete Hegseth spoke to the generals. He basically rumbled and rumbled and rumbled. And you can see the quietness in the faces of the generals. Their non-reaction reaction. And I believe what those generals were saying about, or to Pete Hegseth, dude, shut the fuck up. You don't know what the hell you are talking about. You have no experience and you are mediocre. In terms of his ability to speak, in terms of his charisma, in terms of his posture, you can see that Pete Hegseth was basically trying to look tough, trying to look mature, trying to look strong. He was actually compensating for lots of things that he do not have, or compensating for his own suspicion, for his own lack of confidence, or whatsoever issue he is going through or he was going through. In fact, I have heard recently, in the past day or two, that Pete Hegseth is actually scared for his life, that many members in the now Department of War / Pentagon or whatsoever are saying that this guy is unhinged. This guy got an issue. He is basically paranoid that this or that is trying to get him. And I think that could be the case. Now, friends, I hope you tell me what you think. However, friends, in terms of the meeting and Pete Hegseth's speech and what Donald Trump said, I think it was unnecessary. Of course, it is a necessary thing that leaders all over the world try to strengthen and try to codify some practices in their military and basically modernize their military. However, I think what Hegseth and Donald Trump, the administration, could have done is construct a policy memo and basically sign the policy memo, putting the policy memo into effect. In this case, officials in the military, in the defense apparatus, will basically have to accept that this is the new policy now and basically abiding by the policy. I think gathering these guys in one building at a specific location in real time got the entire world and the entire United States watching. I think, friends, it was unnecessary. It was theatrical. It was made for the camera. It was Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth trying to look strong, trying to look boastful, trying to look tough. I also suspect what Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth did, the reason for getting these guys together, I think it is basically a result of their incompetency, but also their lack of confidence and their anger about what happened recently. When Donald Trump came into power, Donald Trump basically had their parade, which he boasted for or about, the military parade, basically celebrating his birthday. The military parade went horribly. The men who participated in the parade basically looked as if they did not want to be there, as if they were angry, they were pissed off, and also they looked as if they did not know how to march. To be honest, I'm not trying to disrespect them. If you look at what the Russians did on May 9th, the Victory Day parade, and what China did celebrating the 80th anniversary or Victory Day anniversary of the war, World War II in China, the parade was exceptional. It was amazing. Those guys paraded as if they were prepared to parade. They wanted to be there. I think perhaps it could be that lack of confidence, that anger of the fact that the U.S. government, the U.S. Department of Defense, or now Department of War, bragged so much about America's dominance. And we did not see that in terms of how the Americans march.
As President Trump has said, and he's right, we have the strongest, most powerful, most lethal, and most prepared military on the planet. That is true, full stop. Nobody can touch us. It's not even close.
They brag so much, however, we do not see that. We are seeing, on the contrary, the rise of Russia and Russia defeating the United States and the West in Ukraine. We are also seeing the rise of China in terms of Chinese military men's ability to parade or women's ability to march, but also the expansion, the sophistication, the rebuilding of the Chinese military. We saw that in the parade. We saw China unveiling crazy looking weapons. I think that is the anxiety that is being caused in Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump.
Marching across Red Square is the parade formation of the Tver Suvorov Military School. Entering the parade is the ceremonial formation of the St. Petersburg Naval School of the Order of Honor.
But one thing I want to add, by Donald Trump changing the name of the Department of Defense to now Department of War, I think everybody needs to pay attention. Now, friends, if you investigate all over the world, the various departments of the various governments in the world, or as in every country or many countries around the world, ministry of the various governments, the ministry's name carries the function, or you can see the function in the ministry by reading the names of the ministry. Ministry of Agriculture means they focus on agriculture. But Ministry of Defense focus on defense. But now if you name the defense ministry to Ministry of War, then the Ministry of War has to basically act or function, okay, as its name suggests. So does that mean that the United States government, the United States, under the now Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, is going to be out there making wars all over the place as a means to hold up to its name's requirement or to enact upon what its name suggests? That could be the case. I don't know. But it is very interesting. Pete Hegseth, a man who, yes, he went to college, he became an officer, he served in the National Guard or so, going into an arena and trying to point his fingers, poking the military officers or generals. Many of those guys went into the militaries immediately after high school, climbed their way up in the ladder. But friends, I want to end by saying something. Once again, that we could be seeing the United States military armed forces being divided into two camps. One being the full Donald Trump and the full Pete Hegseth and Christian white supremacy, and the other being an opposition force. What Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth was trying to do is to force members to resign or find a way to fire them. Once they begin to do that, I believe the rest of the world need to be very careful, and the rest of the United States need to be very careful. However, it is said that Hegseth now afraid for his safety. I do believe he should be, because what he did, insulting the generals, because that's what this speech was about, insulting the generals, calling them fat.
Jesus said, do unto others that which you would have done unto yourself. It's the ultimate simplifying test of truth. The new War Department golden rule is this: do unto your unit as you would have done unto your own child's unit. Would you want him serving with fat or unfit or undertrained troops, or alongside people who can't meet basic standards? The answer is not just no, it's hell no. It all starts with physical fitness and appearance. If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the Joint Force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year, every year of service. The core of this speech is the 10 directives we're announcing today. They were written for you, for Army leadership, for Navy leadership, for Marine Corps leadership, for Air Force leadership, Space Force leadership.
In every country in the world, the leaders basically maintain their powers by respecting, promoting, and controlling the military. The moment the military starts saying, fuck you, leader, that's it for the leaders. Now, in the United States, because of what's been happening, there are many who are saying that there could be a coup or there could be a revolution. But why hasn't that the case if There are many things that have wrong with America over the past decades. I believe, friends, the United States government has been very stable in its authority because of the security apparatus, the intelligence apparatus. Any government, any military around the world can defeat the US military. The US military, yes, it is the most equipped, but it is not invisible. What we are seeing in Ukraine is an example. The Russians are defeating the United States and NATO combined, basically using Ukraine. China could defeat the United States. Any military in the world, strong or weak, can surprise the United States military. The might of the United States government, the ability of the United States government to maintain authority and its stability in its power, I believe lies in the security apparatus, the intelligence apparatus, the FBI, the CIA, and other intelligence department. Anybody can get angry at the United States government. Anybody can have a plan, a vision, a policy. But the FBI, the CIA, and other intelligence apparatus branches are watching. They could get hold of you. However, by Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump insulting the military, okay, the generals, I do believe it is unlikely that we could see a revolution or a coup. However, in order for that to happen, I believe there must be a linkage, a cooperation, a collaboration between the US military or the US armed forces and the intelligence apparatus, the CIA, the FBI, and other intelligence apparatuses branches. If that becomes the case, we could see a coup in the United States. Now, friends, I want to end by also adding one thing. As Hegseth spoke, he mentioned that the United States now Department of War and the armed forces should basically enforce its will upon the rest of the world, its enemies, and use violence. He stressed violence and explicitly state violence.
Good morning and welcome to the War Department. Because the era of the Department of Defense is over. This clear-eyed view, all the way in the White House, combined with President Trump's military buildup, postures us for future victories if, and we will, and when we embrace the War Department. And we must. We are preparing every day. We have to be prepared for war, not for defense. We're training warriors, not defenders. We fight wars to win, not to defend. Defense is something you do all the time. It's inherently reactionary and can lead to overuse, overreach, and mission creep. War is something you do sparingly, on our own terms, and with clear aims. Well, today is another Liberation Day. The liberation of America's warriors, in name, in deed, and in authorities. You kill people and break things for a living. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. Should our enemies choose foolishly to challenge us, they will be crushed by the violence, precision, and ferocity of the War Department. In other words, to our enemies, F-A-F-O. If necessary, our troops can translate that for you. In closing, a few weeks ago, at our monthly Pentagon Christian prayer service, I recited a commander's prayer. It's a simple yet meaningful prayer for wisdom for commanders and leaders. I encourage you to look it up if you've never seen it. But the prayer, it ends like this. And most of all, Lord, please keep my soldiers safe. Lead them, guide them, protect them, watch over them. And as you gave all of yourself for me, help me give all of myself for them. And amen. I have prayed this prayer many times since I've had the privilege of being your secretary. And I will continue to pray this prayer for each of you as you command and lead our nation's finest. Go forth and do good things, hard things. President Trump has your back, and so do I. And you'll hear from him shortly. Move out and draw fire, because we are the War Department. Godspeed.
That is a scary thing. The rest of the world needs to be very careful and pay attention, because the glove is coming off. Of course, the U.S. has treated the world, the rest of the world, especially the global south, with violence. But now it is being codified, and it is being propagated explicitly that this is what we are going to do to the rest of you. And that is scary. But once again, the meeting and the speech of both Donald Trump, who appeared to be sick and unhealthy, and Pete Hegseth, the now Secretary of War, was just nothing but rumbling, bullshit, stupid. And that could cause both Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth could lead to issues in the armed forces. And who knows, possibly destabilization, unrest, or collaboration between the military and the intelligence apparatus, CIA, FBI, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, friends, please tell me what you think, and I really want to know what you think. But friends, I am going to end here. I want to thank you for being a member of the Echoing Voice community, my friends, but most especially and most importantly, friends, I want to thank you a lot for watching the Echoing Voice. Peace, my friends. Peace.